Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war update extra, all the juicy nuggets to get your teeth into, to give you a greater understanding and depth and breadth of information concerning the war in Ukraine. Let's go first to the Hawk missile system that lots of people have been thinking about. Well, the US were thinking about providing their stock of them. These are now outdated pieces of kit. They've been in circulation, if you like, since the 1960s, used in the Vietnam War. Spain is handing over Ukraine 4 Hawk air defense systems, anti-tank missile complexes, guns, and a battery of fast-speed anti-aircraft missile complex. The head of the Foreign Ministry, Dmitry Kuleba, at a briefing with a Spanish colleague, Jose Manuel Alvarez, says. So that's really good news. Well, this Hawk, let's have a little think about this Hawk. So the US are considering sending these. They've got a whole bunch of them, I believe, in storage because they were used up until sort of 2002. Well, have a listen to this video. This gives a good sort of introduction to what it is, and this is from the Forces News, a UK outlet.
A quick look at some of the high-tech weapon systems which have been sent to Ukraine. But many of these bits of kit are expensive, and getting the right amount quickly enough could explain this latest move. Welcome to the past, as we meet the Hawk missile system. These pictures were filmed by the US military in Vietnam in the 1960s. They show the early variant of the Hawk. It's been in operation since 1959, and these antique shots aren't our attempt to hammer home just how old it is. It's just we couldn't find many pictures of the system at all. Hawk is a medium to long-range surface-to-air missile with an operational range of 45 to 50 kilometres. It can fly up to 65,000 feet and reach speeds of Mach 2.4. It was used by the US right up until 2002, but was largely superseded by the Patriot missile systems by 1994. But many other nations around the world have used Hawk and continue to do so.
Now here's our Hawk.
So that's that, and here's a few pictures of it, sort of in more recent operation, and there you go. Pretty big missiles, to be fair, fairly capable in terms of speed. It's going to be of use to have these systems, of course, for Ukraine. And I've talked about before about getting rid of old rubbish on Ukraine, but I think these have been updated since the 60s. These are far, it's not like these are from the 60s. They're hugely updated systems, a bit like the tanks get updated as well. The version of the T-55, the M55 from Slovenia, 28 were just given recently, and they were hugely updated so that they're almost, unrecognizable from the original T-55 upon which they were based. But this Hawk system, I think, will be a useful addition, given the trouble that Ukraine are having with cruise missiles and with air attacks. I forgot to mention on the map today that Marinka was attacked. A map update that Marinka has been attacked by air and rocket attacks and artillery and so on. But the fact of me wanting to say that was how active the Russian Air Force still is, quite often dropping things from afar, firing missiles from afar, but they are still, being used around. And the Hawk system, I think, will be a useful addition to the defenses that Ukraine have. Okay, I talked on the map video this morning about attacking empty space, and actually this is Andrew Perpetua talking about exactly this. These areas where Russia is counter-attacking in Svatova are not areas that Ukraine controlled in the first place. It was grey areas. Don't act like Russia is taking ground or whatever. It was ground nobody was in on either side, outside of maybe some recon or something. However, at the same time, Ukraine is actually taking Russian positions. Their advance has not stopped. It's just isn't talked about as much, and when it is talked about, it is with delay, or as I do now, without detail of exact location for OPSEC. Pictures and videos will come. The advance is slow for two reasons. One, the defender has the advantage of elevation. So this is talking about in the Svatova area, although there's interesting elevation usage in the Svatova area. Clearing out forest strips is slow and dangerous. There are many places to hide, potential for traps, etc. Clearing out these areas takes time, and there is no shortcut. As well, there are mines being used by both sides in the area, so things will be slow. Also, this idea that Russia pushed Ukraine out of Makivka. So this is a town between Svatovo and Kremina on the Kherson River. Ukraine wasn't there to begin with. This is standard misinformation. They take events that happen over a long period of time and pretend they all happened at the same time to make it sound like some great success. And regarding Makivka, the other day I read a report of Ukraine shelling there, and I marked the shelling on my map. That was like 2 days ago. His point, he's retaliating to people saying, oh, pro-Russians saying, oh, look, Russians have taken this area. And either, Ukrainians weren't actually there before, or it's open area of fields that no one's really controlling it. It's a grey zone, so on and so forth. So there's lots of ways of interpreting the claims from either side that Russia or Ukraine have taken this area, have taken that area, when of course that area could just be empty ground. Okay, I just want to say yesterday I did a little bit at the end of my video that was just kind of off the cuff, actually, about why I do this and why I'm interested in this war. And I invited you to take part in discussions in the thread below that video. And I'll tell you what, you guys in the main have some really eloquent and thoughtful discussions and comments in the threads. I'd love to spend so much more time on them, but I can't. But just really good stuff. Talking about exactly why you're interested in the war. Before I go on to that, I just want to talk. Richard Gilman here says, and he often comes up with some great quotes, great comments. He's talking about, yesterday I talked about the officers having a high rate of attrition. He said, I agree that extremely high casualty rate for Russian officers is critically important for 3 reasons. 1, lack of trained NCO requires substitution officers at the front of troops where they are attrited and cannot be replaced. 2, the Russian top-down command structure is overly dependent of the officer corps, whether competent or not, because their patina of authority cowls the conscripts. And 3, liquidation of the officer corps will spell the end of Russia's aggressive military machine. He's saying that how important it is that the officers are being attrited to such a high degree, and that will really affect the capability of the Russian war machine. Completely agree, and it's going to be really interesting to see how taking experienced soldiers and basically replacing them with mobilized conscripts is going to affect the operational effectiveness of the Russian forces. So coming on to the idea of why we do this, there were so many good comments. I'd love to just spend a load of time on this. Let's just pick one. Here's from Jose Antonio Diaz Romero. This is not just another war. It's evident there's a clear moral and economic background. Sometimes I think that Russian society is immersed in an anachronistic, ancient imperial conquest thoughts. This is no longer in fashion. I don't even think that this war has so much interest on the geostrategic plane. I'm more interested in the question of emotional intelligence and whether it can be transferred to society as a whole. To use an analogy to make myself understood, in this war, the reptilian part of the brain is facing the rational part of the human brain. Brute force against ingenuity, innovation, and determination for the defense of values based on freedom. Another aspect that is also very interesting for me and that you develop wonderfully is the aspect of propaganda and how it influences human beings. Propaganda does not have to be bad in itself. It depends on the use made of it. So really interesting comments, and Maximilian Schönhausen here giving his opinion, really good as a German who is interested in all of this. And just I want to spend loads of time talking about this, but I won't. However, I will sort of sum up some different positions on this. So I think why are we interested in this war is a lot to do with justice and the underdog and this moral good versus evil and the desire for comeuppance for someone who has been really unfairly attacked. And this is to do a little bit of off-the-cuff psychologizing here. It just come to me that this could well be... So in psychology, there's something called the just world theory. So the just world theory is this idea that we all have, that the world is fair. Now, for a secular person like me, the universe isn't fair. It's just, shit happens and you've got to deal with it. But there's still this feeling that it should be fair, or that we have this sense of fairness. We can see this in loads of really interesting experiments with capuchin monkeys to show that they have fairness and justice inbred in them. It's inherent in them. through, evolution and whatever. So anyway, we have this idea of the world being just, except it's not. And so when someone unfairly attacks someone else, it really triggers our sense of justice. And we look at that and we go, that's really, really unfair. And we can't let that remain being unfair because it just doesn't sit well with us. Like I remember a couple of years ago where we just moved into this house, and we got with this house this big range cooker, right? One of these big, like fairly expensive pieces of kit, or at least it wasn't expensive to us because it was already there. And then my twins were pushing each other as toddlers up and down on this wheelie chair in the kitchen, and it went, and one of the twins went and smashed into the door, right? And the door shattered, and we're like, oh my goodness. So we had to look to buy a replacement door, but they didn't make this particular cooker anymore, and so we'd have to replace it for like £2,000, £1,500. We're like, no. Eventually, we did find a second-hand door and we got hold of it. But that night, my partner was saying, "Oh my goodness." Do you know what? I think that happened for a reason. That happened for a reason. I think maybe we were going to get carbon monoxide poisoning, and therefore that stopped that. And I was just listening to her, and my brain was straight going to just world theory. So what she was doing is she was trying to justify a moral bad by creating a scenario where it was morally good, or at least morally neutral. And we do that all the time. It doesn't matter what you believe. And in fact, when you look at the history of religion and stuff like that, and don't attack, if you're really religious, don't attack me. I'm not preaching to you. I'm not whatever, but these are historical facts I'm saying. So when you look at the development of the ideas of heaven and hell, they didn't exist. For example, if you're interested in this stuff, they didn't exist in the Old Testament of the Hebrew Bible. There's no real afterlife until much later in what's called the intertestamental period, which is between the Old and New Testament. And you had these the Hellenized Jews oppressing the Orthodox Jews in what was called the Seleucid Empire. And during this time, they started questioning, hang on, we're like supposedly the chosen people of God. Why is bad things happening to good people? And why they're horrible people? Why is good things happening to them? So you started seeing the development of the ideas of heaven and hell from that point on in the Judeo-Christian context. And actually, they stole those ideas from the Greeks, these Hellenized Jews, these kind of Greek Jews. They had the ideas of Tartarus, the Elysian fields, all this kind of stuff, right? So they adopted ideas of heaven and hell, and it was then, it then filtered into their own religious beliefs and their own sort of doctrine going forward. Sort of. It's actually really vague when you look at the Bible, but whatever. I don't want to get into religion, but this is the idea that we have to have fairness, right? And so therefore, heaven and hell are ways for us to cope with the unfairness of the world, because it all gets balanced after we die. So some people believe, right? Or a lot of people believe. And now, I don't want to get into a big debate about whether that exists or not, whatever. My point is about justice and about our inherent desire for a just world. So when we look at this war, we are looking at it as outsiders and going, that's really unfair that the Russians have just gone into Ukraine and beaten them up, right? Or like causing mayhem or killing loads of people and civilians. And that triggers our sense of injustice or justice. The lack of justice there, giving us cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is this idea that we have when we have a core belief, the world is fair, and we have evidence against that belief, the world is unfair, Russia's invaded Ukraine. This causes disharmony or dissonance, and our brains can't handle cognitive dissonance. So they go through something called cognitive dissonance reduction. So cognitive dissonance reduction is the ways that your brain cope with the dissonance. Now, you can either get rid of the evidence, bury your head in the sand, pretend it's not happening, or you adapt the evidence, or whatever. But generally, you don't shift your core belief. So if your core belief that the world is fair, then you will be adapting the evidence that it's not fair to that to somehow make these harmonious, these two kind of beliefs, or the belief and the evidence, harmonious. So what we have here is a real unfairness of Ukraine being attacked, and we have to deal with that. So the way that we deal with, Ukraine being attacked, but the belief that the world is just, is we try and make it just ourselves by supporting the West's defense of Ukraine, by saying that 8 ATACMS should be sent to Ukraine, by doing our best to spread our support for the underdog, for the person who is being um, bullied in this scenario, if you like. Um, but if Ukraine end up losing for whatever reason, and we stop giving our support to Ukraine, our brains will have a meltdown, because it will be like, that's massively unfair. Some people might justify that by saying, oh, we can't help everyone, it's their tough, they're going to have to look after themselves, and that's a kind of way of compartmentalizing the unfairness and whatever. Or people will have different ways of dealing with that eventuality if it ever comes to happen. But what I'm trying to say is be aware of what your brain is doing in trying to deal with all the information, but in also, like, wondering why you're so interested in this. And lots of you in the comments have said it's about good and evil. It's about, I know that's really simplistic and it's far more nuanced than that, but it's about the underdog, David and Goliath, or whatever, however you want to analogize it, and the emotional response to seeing all these images of destruction and death and torture and violence that has been forced on one person by an aggressor. And there you go. Anyway, that was a massive rant, and I just, like, off the cuff there. So sorry if, and I don't mean to alienate any of my views. You probably know my views on philosophy and whatever, but just to talk about, like, those ideas of justice, I think it's useful to flesh them out and contextualize them. Anyway, whatever. Kherson update. People driving. So I didn't say this earlier, and this would have been really useful for my Kherson part of the map update this morning. Kherson update. People are driving around Kherson city and reporting all the roadblocks and soldiers are gone. Flags are taken down from government buildings. Defensive positions north of the city are abandoned. Really interesting, that. And another one here saying Kherson locals applaud in a city bus as they pass by an abandoned Russian checkpoint for the first time. P.S. Yesterday, Russians abandoned one of the city's most cruel and infamous checkpoints in Kherson, Ostrov district. So what is this saying? Are the army really actually pulling out? Yeah, I talked about this morning. Or are they staying in just enough? Or are they properly defending? You know, what on that spectrum of you know, different different possibilities. Sorry, I can't find the words. MS taking over my brain there. You know, what is the reality? Okay, this is worth having a little look at. This is a Stugna or skiff. These are Ukrainian made, and I'll just show you one of them. One of the attacks. So here's something in the distance being blown up. So you have a tripod with a rocket launcher or missile launcher, and then someone about 20 to 50 meters away connected with this monitor that is guiding the missile once it's been shot onto the vehicle, and then they pack up shop and usually get out there pretty quickly, because obviously the enemy can triangulate where they are or whatever. So the reason I wanted to show this, I talked about this before. This one has got Arabic writing on, and this is because at the beginning of the war, Ukraine were going to sell a load of these, and in fact there is a lot of renewed interest in these machines because they have done such a good job. The Stugna, absolutely brilliant, but it's covered in Arabic writing because they were going to sell them to the Middle East, and the war broke out, and they're like, probably not a good time to sell these. We might need them. And indeed, they did need them. So you have lots of people questioning, hey, why's that got Arabic writing? Why have the Middle East been supplying them with stuff? But it's not. It was due to be exported there. So there's also been, I think it's down here, yeah. So rare footage of a UK-supplied Stormer HVM short-range AD system, so air defense system, in action with the Ukrainian army using lightweight multi-role missiles, LMM. So these are missiles that can be used for a variety of things, or Starstreak surface-to-air missiles to shoot down what appears to be a Russian drone. So this is the Stormer. Well, it is rare footage. We haven't seen much of Stormer. We know that we gave at least 6 of them to the UK, gave at least 6 of them to Ukraine. These are armored vehicles that can be used as a mobile platform to transport the high-velocity Starstreak missile system. There is an example of one, a tracked vehicle which have radar capability, and here probably the Starstreak there. The Starstreak is something that can also be used not as shoulder. I think there is one that can be used as a shoulder mounted, and then you have these ones that have three on that use a stand. So I think there's quite a bit of variation there, adaptability in how the system is used. But there you go. That's just what the Stormer is, and some footage of that being used. Here is a Gepard, the Gepard, however you want to pronounce it. I don't know, someone will tell me. This is the autocannon that's been used really effectively recently, that was originally given, and people were like, well, that's not very useful. They need something more robust than that. But actually, this has been really good for shooting down the drones, and also has apparently hit a couple of cruise missiles as well. This is a good look at the vehicle, and they might be running a little low on the ammunition. I'm not 100% sure, but there was talk about Germany wanting to give a bunch over, but it was made by Switzerland, and the Swiss don't allow them to sell it on or give it on. But anyway, you can see this vehicle here. It's a good sort of walk around a vehicle, if you like. 360-degree rotation of the turret, radar, and those pretty, almost looks like Star Wars-esque X-Wing. I'm showing my geek heritage there. But there, that's a Gepard. Happy days. Unless you're a drone being shot by that. Okay, sabotage on Russia's rail network added to the high number of mobilized troops they're trying to move around is causing problems for the invaders. Here, the regional governor of Kuzbass complains their coal's not being delivered. This is fascinating, and there's a lot of people calling for support of rail network sabotage, both in the occupied regions of Ukraine and in Russia itself. So actually, it's all about the rail. Russia are all about the rail. If you can take out those rail networks, so we had Shakhtarsk recently being hit several days in a row, that would take out that line and that junction, and that possibly even that station, for a good amount of time. Now, you can replace rail relatively quickly, but taking out these key junctions and junction boxes and relay boxes and all those sort of things will give the Russians a real headache in terms of their transportation logistics. Okay, the amount of cringe energy, I love that, the amount of cringe energy which this Russian propaganda video produces alone could power a city. I wonder what the 700,000 Russians who fled their country have to say when seeing this, all those Russian troops in the trenches without proper winter gear. This is just a really slick, in a sense, like visually fairly slick propaganda video. It's just ridiculous. I'll play it. This is like someone in the UK in winter not being able to use fuel to power their houses. Incidentally, we only use about 5% Russian gas here, I think. So, get over yourselves, Russia. It's not the UK you want to be talking about here. But anyway, we're the fall guys at the moment for a lot of their attention. Here's the. It's hilarious. It's like we won't have heaters in 2023. Our economy will be so destroyed, and yet Moscow, Russia's economy, is apparently going to be unbelievably comfortable. Right? They're not just about to enter into a recession themselves. Because Russians, general Russian population, have a really high median wage, right? And they just be able to blow money like that around. Of course, yeah, there must be Russians watching this going, "That's not me. That's not my life." Russians living out in Buryatia in the east going, what is this? Oh, this is Moscow elites. Okay. Please send more photos of you, and she can't because she's got no electricity, because that's what's going to happen in the UK, right? This is all about positioning Russia as the energy powerhouse of the world.
Woohoo! I'm going to see a Russian mill.
О, привет.
Susie, open the window. It's so hot in here.
Just absolute nonsense. I guess that'll play to the Russians well, but will they feel like they're living like that? Will they? I guess there's going to be a lot of. I don't know how much the heating systems in Russia. I know in Ukraine there are centralized heating systems whereby the town provides sort of heating for buildings and whatnot. And this is when you have that much raw material, you know, the natural resources of the gas and oil and coal that Russia do, then, you know, they might well be able to because they're not selling it to anyone else. So they might as well, you know, give it to their own population. But I can't imagine that Russia is not going to be in absolute economic catastrophe at some point fairly soon. And talking about the Russians and how they live, this is a building in Poland that the Russian embassy were using, and they were, I don't know if they were ejected or whether they moved out or whatever, but this is how they left it, ripping cables from the wall. And it just reminds me of the camps I was talking about, and how they lived in the in these in the Russian you know, war camps, and their little sort of bases they set up, which is so disgusting and poorly looked after. And here the Polish are saying, you know, look at this, it's just insane. Let's translate this tweet. So today, the forest guard entered the premises of the centre in Skubianka on Zegrozy, leased leased by the Russian embassy. After the outbreak of the war, we terminated the contract with them. The resort is completely devastated. The Russians have destroyed everything. Even cables are torn from the walls. So there you go. Thanks, Russia. Here's something I wanted to make a comment on that other people have also made comment on. So I talked about how the mobilised troops are getting pretty upset and discontent with the way they're being treated in terms of not being paid their rubles, so on and so forth. You've seen that video, and it's an absolutely brilliant point. We must remember they're not getting annoyed because they're being sent to another country to kill other people. They're not annoyed because they're going to be like maybe killing civilians either directly or with collateral. They're not annoyed that they're attacking a sovereign country and it's morally reprehensible. They're annoyed they're not getting paid some money they were promised, and it gives it a slightly different tint to how you view that whole video or these sorts of events, and I think it's worth bearing in mind. Okay, Tara English in the comments has asked me a couple of times about weapons on the black market and the idea that these claims that we'll be seeing, or we have seen, all these weapons that we're giving to Ukraine, flooding the black market, being sold on eBay, getting into the wrong hands, all this kind of stuff. And there's generally the long and short of it is there's no evidence for this at all yet. But this is a worry nonetheless. Here's a thread by Luke Coffey, who is, I think, a politician, American politician. I'm not 100% sure. So he goes through a bunch of myths. These last myths are quite interesting. Myth 5, Europe needs to spend more. This is not to do with that point, but I'm just going to say this anyway because it's quite interesting. So you get quite a few Americans saying, we're spending so much. This is crazy. What are the rest of the world doing? And in fact, some people in my own comment threads are saying this. But you've got to understand the expenditure as a percentage of GDP. So what your country is producing on a national basis each year. As the myth 5, Europe needs to spend more. Reality, as a percentage of GDP, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Lithuania, Norway, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, UK, and Portugal have given more to Ukraine than the US. So regarding refugee support, the US is at the bottom. Can Europe do more? Yes, but they're already doing a lot. So that's a really huge point, and take that on board, guys, because there's a lot of Americans out there watching this, and there will be some of you will be saying you're doing the most, etc., because your media is telling you that partly, but also there's a bit of a misinformation out there, which is to say that actually it may be the case in real terms, but you've got the biggest economy in the biggest country and the biggest tax revenue and the biggest all this kind of stuff. So therefore, that's the wrong figure you're looking at. You want to be looking at a percentage figure. Myth 6, US should only give military aid. Reality, it's not just the Ukrainian military at war with Russia. The whole of Ukrainian society is at war. 45% of Ukraine's GDP has gone due to war. And of course, this is back in September the 28th, a month ago, so it'll be worse than that now. Police, government, etc. must function. Total war requires total government. USA must be comprehensive. So it can't just be about giving weapons. It's got to be about a holistic approach. Myth 7, and this is getting on to Tara's points. US weapons are ending up on the black market and not getting to the front lines. Reality, there is no evidence of weapons are going missing. On the contrary, recent events in Kharkiv and Kherson prove otherwise, and also prove the effectiveness of US aid. Just to let you know, there is a report out or a plan. Here's a fact sheet from the Bureau of Political and Military Affairs from the US Department of State. This is a US plan to counter illicit diversion of certain advanced conventional weapons in Eastern Europe. I won't read you through this. This is pretty big. Well, it's not that huge, but just to let you know that this is in the thoughts of the Americans. They are doing things there's an action plan to stop this from happening, and you can go and have a look at that yourself. I'll put the link in the description. But just to let you know that there will be processes in place and mechanisms in place to stop the weapons, or at least to try and reduce the probability of the weapons getting into the wrong hands. As ever, this will happen. I mean, there's evidence that when I was looking through for information on this, and before I found this, there's evidence that corrupt American officials, like true people in the army, have been selling weapons to other. This happens all the time, everywhere, and it's not just American. This happens all over the world. But you put things in place to mitigate that from happening. So that is going forward what will no doubt be the case here. There is no solid evidence that is happening, at least yet. Two more things. Sorry, it's been a long one because I've been ranting. Switzerland to provide $106 million for Ukraine's energy infrastructure recovery. So they've gone to a bit of hassle. They've been hassled a bit recently for not allowing certain weapons or munitions to be given on from other countries that they have made and sold to those countries. I talked about the Gepard ammunition as one example. However, here, Switzerland's Federal Council has adopted the Winter Aid Action Plan to lighten the impact of the coming winter on Ukrainians. The initiative implies supplying Ukraine with almost $106 million in aid to fund the urgent rehabilitation of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which is so important. This is as important as military aid is at the moment, for sure. The country will supply Ukraine with generators, pumps, and water treatment installations. The thing about the hitting of energy infrastructure is, and this wouldn't have been intentional, this was like a bit of added bonus for the Russians, is that it took out the electricity infrastructure being down, also took out pumping capabilities for pumping water. So whole areas have been without water off and on. And this has been a real problem for the Ukrainians, not only dealing with a lack of electricity, but a lack of fresh water. And when you've got dialysis machines in hospitals that can't function without consistent electricity, obviously, but also water, then you're in trouble. You know, this has huge ramification, and then you're in the territory of war crimes again, obviously, because hey, it is. Last thing, beards. Everyone loves a beard, right? Good morning for the front line. A 2S7 Pion at work, right?
Постріл! Постріл!
Okay, just because I want to give respect to Ukrainian beard usage. There's been a far greater beard per person ratio in the Ukrainian forces than I can see the Russian forces. I can see very few Russian fighters with anything that approaches a decent beard, other than some of the Chechen fighters who do it more for Islamic reasons rather than pure aesthetic appeal, which, let's face it, is awesome. It might not win the war, but it is winning the hearts and minds of people like me. So here's some respect to Ukrainian beard usage. Well done, excellent, and just marvelous. Keep it going, guys. Anyway, thank you for all your support. Please like, subscribe, share. If you want to support my channel in other ways, such as going to uasupporter.com/ATP, you can grab yourself some clothing, some other stuff, drinkware. It's a really cool way of showing your support for Ukraine. Here are some lovely women's hoodies. Help yourself, and a tiny bit of commission goes to my channel, so it's really appreciated. And I think it's always good to signal that you are supportive of certain causes, and to be supportive of the Ukrainian cause is to support the right people in this moral conflict. Anyway, thanks as ever. You take care, and I will speak to you tomorrow.